Hello and welcome to Bristol Sport TV's new series, Meet the Boss. Well, whilst we're all living life in lockdown, we thought it would be a good opportunity to take a bit of a closer look at some of our key partners and sponsors, find out how they're coping with the current crisis, but also find out a bit more about their company and why they got involved with the sporting group. Well, I'm pleased to say that the CEO of cloud-based finance company Xledger, Mark Pullen, joins us today. Hello, Mark. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Lisa. How are you?
Yep, we're all coping fine in our remote virtual studios, as you are. You know, we're getting a good glimpse of insight into people's homes as well. I think we might start a new series of, snooping through the keyhole, but via a laptop. Many of our fans will be familiar with Xledger. They'll have noticed the Xledger branding that went up on the South Stand as your sponsors of that. Just give us a bit of insight into how you got involved with Bristol Sport in the first place and where that interest first developed.
Yeah, sure. So it was very much driven by, I was only recently appointed to the CEO role of Xledger, and within the process of understanding the identity of that company, that organization that I was going to take the reins of, it very quickly became apparent that there wasn't much of an identity in the UK. So very well known in Scandinavia, some presence in the US, very little over here. So what I wanted to start with is really focus on the community that we're part of. We are Bristol based, and where better to start with than the Ashton Gate. So we started discussions looking at the various options. I come from a rugby background, so that was one of my focuses, but obviously there's so much in the sporting world that is addressed at Ashton Gate. It addressed a multitude of audiences that really appealed to us. So we started from that perspective.
Well, you talk there about a bit of history with rugby. Of course, I think you played yourself and your son is involved as well with the Bears Academy. So you've actually had a chance over a number of years to see sort of what that statement and belief in community is, that culture that's been developed over a number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, without a healthy dose of nepotism with a sponsorship deal and sons in academies, what it did enable us to do was really spend time and understand and see how our kids, my sales director's son also plays in the academy, and we see the kind of gentleman they're becoming because of the ethos that is coming and filtering all the way down from Pat through the academy and the work they do with 1,200 or so kids in the academy across Bristol. And what that enabled us to do was to really match and understand the ethos of the business, not just the rugby that led on into Bristol Sport. And you could almost, we had many conversations with Pat, and everything he stands for, everything Bristol Sport stands for in the community was the identity that we wanted to be affiliated with. We feel it reflects Xledger, the type and style of business we are. And in the absence of huge marketing budgets and national campaigns that we can't really afford, we wanted to focus on our community. And that was the best brand that we could come up with that really mapped and married to what we want to achieve.
Yeah, well, as you say, it's a fairly new foray, if you like, for Xledger into the UK market, but it's been obviously longer established in the Scandinavian countries and the US market. But it's interesting that the culture that was being sort of created over the last few years here with Pat Lam and the Bears was something that actually fitted with Xledger's core brand and values over a number of years as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. And we had a fantastic meeting with Pat when he was, you got to hold on to your wallet when you talk to that man. He's extremely inspiring and, gave us a fantastic rendition of the future and the plans of what he's looking at. This was actually brought out because we looked at the commercial element of sponsoring a stadium. And there are obvious benefits to the exposure that you get from that. But equally, as a brand, we wanted to reflect the family nature. We're Norwegian by trade, and it's very work-life balance orientated. And again, talking with Pat about the academy spurred us into actually looking at what else we can do with Bristol Sport and particularly the academy. So we're now working very closely with the guys that run the academy. We've provided funding. We want to expand out the non-commercial, more human element of exposing as many of these kids to the environment that rugby in this case, but sport in general, the sort of individuals you generate and the sort of activities the kids are involved in was a real core driver for us. And it again mapped to some of our, we wanted to be authentic. It's not just about return on investment and selling our product. It's about the identity we have in our community. So we wanted two focuses: one, the academy and the kids and what we're doing there, as well as the commercial element of the stadium.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure many companies sit and listen to that and go, yeah, that's something that we would love. Many companies would like to be involved in, but of course, sports sponsorship isn't something that's cheap, as you say, hang on to your wallet. But in terms of the exposure that it gets you, I guess it's getting that from grassroots right the way through to elite level exposure, and also exposure for a company that is trying to get a foothold in the UK market. So building some brand awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And that let's not be naive. That is the premise for allocation of marketing budget. And there are various KPIs, performance indicators that you put in place to measure the success of that expenditure. And as a relatively small business, every penny counts. This was a longer term play for me and for us and our marketing team. So this was not something that I expected definitive ROI very quickly from. Ironically, we did have some very good opportunities. People in the accounting and finance world are in that target audience. They spend time in the stadium, and where they were seeing us from other marketing activities or events, they were associating that with, Xledger, we've seen you at the stadium, and instantly gives you an identity. It gives you common ground with those individuals to then have a more commercial conversation. But really, we weren't expecting that. That was a Brucey bonus as far as we were concerned. This is a long-term deal. We structured a long-term program with Bristol Sport to ensure that this is not a flash in the pan, not sort of Xledger were there 1 minute and then disappearing in a season later. It was primarily to support our brand, to associate ourselves with a brand that we felt shared the same vision and values, and then be part of supporting that growth and that brand and the team's performance and the football, the Flyers, the rugby, and being associated with that success. From an academy perspective, as a business, we're very orientated towards the foundation of organizations. You have to have very good financial controls, accounting systems, and access to those systems as a foundation for building, fantastic performing businesses. We could talk about Saracens in that effect. The best team in the world didn't quite get the finances straight, and that team falls apart. So that was the methodology or the theory behind the academy, was let's really support from the foundation up, and that supports what are now becoming some of the the UK's greatest teams, as I see it, in here at home in Bristol.
Yeah, I'm sure, and it fits with that whole, the Bristol Sport ethos of the team behind the team. It is that getting those underlying pillars in place to build sustainable success, I guess. In terms of some of your memories, I know you're fairly newly appointed to Xledger. I think it was the end of summer last year that you took up the CEO role for Xledger. Some highlights so far of the last year. I don't know. I presume you were here for the opening game against Bath, although perhaps not quite in position.
We weren't in position. I was in position. That's one you can't miss. To kick off the season is always a very extremely popular one, especially when you win. But
it's always better when you win.
Yeah, absolutely. Twice, just to reiterate that. The start for me was very much about understanding the organisation, looking at the identity that we have, looking at the organisation staff base, and looking at the means by which we're going to build an organisation that can scale, maintain its customer delivery. Where I know everyone says this, but very customer centric, customer focused. And how do you scale a business quickly whilst maintaining those values? So we've doubled since I've joined. So there were 11 people. We're now 26 in the UK. The current climate is not helping us on that mission. But nonetheless, it was very much about taking stock of what we've got, looking at the team, positioning. And I'm going to use one of Pat's acronyms that he one of Pat's anecdotes that he uses, which is, when he first joined Bristol Sport, there were many buses all heading in a similar but vaguely different direction. His first role was to create one bus. I did the same. We had lots of divisions of the organization going in slightly different directions, all with similar objectives, but a different version of how to get there. So let's create one bus. The next part is take all your team and get them in the right seats on the bus. And we've done that. Next for us was expanding the bus and getting a bigger one. So it was galvanizing the team we had, looking at our operational structure around supporting our customers, maintaining the core values of the business while achieving as rapid as is sustainable growth.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a perfect analogy to use. The on the bus or off the bus is a good one. Is a good one when you're trying to get everyone to pull in the same direction, and it seems to be working happily. Yeah, happily both for Bears and for you guys. So you guys, obviously, we've mentioned BAFF there. It's always quite nice. Yes, who's counting the victories? It was probably a chance for some of your key clients, but also some of your staff to come to a stadium that often perhaps haven't naturally come to before.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because one of the things that was became apparent very early when I first joined the business was this was not inherently a rugby cultured type of organization. There were lots of people. There's, one of our consultants is very associated with Basketball Wales. There are other guys that are into horse riding, football, real eclectic mix, but nobody really into rugby, which was, apart from being vastly disappointing and a slightly harder sell internally of our sponsorship of Bristol Sport. What I've noticed is that the minute we created that association, we started branding everything. We have an awful lot, everyone got shirts with Bears and Xledger and all sorts of different things. There was an instant move from people that had not historically been involved in rugby or sport in general to, I'm actually proud of this. This gives me an identity, and we've taken them all to the games. And we do have a healthy mix of, sometimes you just want to be there in amongst everybody, in that south stand, in the singers' corner, blaring out and celebrating with everybody else whenever you can, versus a bit more of the the hospitality side of things. So we're quite careful to what we expose people to, and we've done some games where we've just taken staff. Let's go and have some fun. Let's go watch Bristol beat Gloucester, or let's go and watch the Bath game. And others, we have used it for primarily partners and customers to say, come and spend some time with us with the backdrop of a rugby game. We're quite careful with that as well, because often I see in the hospitality suite these meetings happening while the game's going on outside. We still like to go and watch the rugby and support our team.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned sort of something almost for everybody there. You mentioned basketball with Wales basketball. Of course, our sporting group is unique in Britain in terms of having this sort of multi-sport approach under one single common ownership. And I guess as well, it's, you hear so much about company diversity, board diversity, having something for everything. I guess from a CEO's point of view, it's probably quite important to offer, your male staff, your female staff, whatever sport they might be interested in, being able to perhaps tap into a fairly good mix. And of course, the Bears women is a key part of our brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we pride ourselves on being a diverse young business, in our world, which is tech, accounting and finance. We actually have 52% of our staff are women. Which is fantastic. It wasn't by design, it was just best people for the job. So diversity is core to our value. What we got with Bristol Sport was not just diversity in the number of sports that are associated with it, but it was the access to different experiences that give us an opportunity to spend time with each other, but also with customers. And even if you don't like rugby or you don't like football, go to the event. It's a phenomenal stadium. The noise, the atmosphere that it creates is something that, what's going on the pitch becomes secondary to just having some fun, having a couple of drinks with your colleagues and enjoying that environment. But yes, you're absolutely right. The diversity is wonderful. The growth plans, which I hope still remain on track with the new part of the stadium and everything, and that's going to be the sort of sporting quarter of Bristol, all happen because it's, it really does knock on to the wider community.
Yeah, well, you've touched on, evoking those memories of the stadium being packed and the noise sort of singing from the rafters. None of us can wait for sport to return, but you've mentioned, it is a difficult time. We're all going through uncharted waters, and companies are having to adapt and evolve or die. How has it been for you guys? I mean, obviously it's perhaps curtailed some of your expansion plans into the UK, but I guess as a cloud-based tech company, you're probably best placed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first thing that we did was you've got to look at how to be appropriate as a business. Yes, we had plans. Yes, there are lots of sales activity and lots of people that are targeted on growth and the acquisition of new customers. But we actually found it fairly easy to just say, right, now we're going to adapt. Now we're going to change. That is not appropriate behavior right now. Our focus very much quickly shifted to a new methodology that we call being useful. Everything we will do as Xledger, as individuals and as a brand, should be perceived as being useful. We're not going to take advantage, and people shouldn't, and thankfully not many are, of this, what is a catastrophe, a really difficult time. We should be leading the way, coming up with ideas of how we can support our communities. I have the kids out the back behind me in the kitchen. We bought them a 3D printer. They're busy printing face masks or face shields for the NHS. That's the ethos in the business, is now we need to support our customers. Now we need to make sure that, they are advantageous. They do have a cloud-based system. It is subscription-based, so they can flex. We've given payment hiatuses to some of our more vulnerable customers, but we're financially secure and solid globally. So let's focus on how to help. And we want customers at the end of this. We want businesses at the end of this. We want sports teams at the end of this. We want hotels, restaurants. What are we doing that is useful? Yes, it has, delayed our progress, but that is what it is. There's not a lot you can do about that. It's how you behave during that crisis that, really gives us some pride in terms of what our identity is and what did we do when we look back on this.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand how Xledger's values have fitted so well with ours, because it's very similar with the stadium. I'm sure you've been following how the stadium has sort of very quickly flicked from the Friday night on the before the official government lockdown being closed to by the Monday it was open with the sports bar with feeding Bristol's homeless. And as you say, it's almost like a definition. I think the public will look back on this time and look at companies that have previously said, they are in the heart of the community, those that actually have delivered and have been useful. I know the Lansdowns, very early on, as soon as this happened, were right, what can we do? How can we transform Ashton Gate to become this hub for the community? And it's interesting hearing your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and that's, what can we do? It's lots of little things that mount up to be something a bit greater, but I think it's just behaving with some authenticity, with some compassion. There is, we're in a fortunate position. We have not had to furlough any of our staff. We are still operating. We're still acquiring new customers, ironically, some quicker than we would have done before, because they now need access to a cloud-based solution. But in the meantime, there are a lot of people that don't have that. By behaving appropriately, it provides inspiration, and particularly, you've got a lot of personalities, some celebrity, within that sporting environment. That comes with an obligation to show the way, to sort of say, right, this is what we can do. We can get into our community. We can make sure kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing and not sending parents mental. A good example I've got as well is I'm blown away at the moment. So, as I've mentioned, my son is in the Bears Academy. And every day, almost every day, we get an email, or he gets an email from the coaching staff reminding him of what it takes to be a man in this sort of scenario, making sure you're helping. Get out there and go and find some of the old people in your community and make sure they're okay. We get sent recipes. Make sure you go and cook meatballs. We had the other night, which were fantastic. There was a menu sent through from the coaching staff. They're completely aware of how they're supposed to behave, and that's the inspiration that the sporting community brings to everyone and to all of us.
Mark, thank you very much for joining us. It's been fascinating to talk to you, and stay safe and stay well and stay home until it is safe to do so. We look forward to having you back at the stadium soon.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks very much.
That's it from me. Hope you enjoyed Meet the Boss. Do follow us on social media so you can stay across all of our latest news. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well.